Hello, and welcome to Psychology Demystified. Today's topic focuses on feedback and how to respond to someone who finds it difficult to accept your feedback. Some people find it difficult to accept feedback, and the way they respond to you after you give them feedback can seem like they're trying to avoid responding in a way that might make them seem vulnerable. Believe it or not, accepting feedback is one of the most difficult conversation or communication skills to master. And why is it so hard to accept feedback? Because it involves listening to something that you may have done that affected someone, and then trying to also to figure out how to grow from that thing that you did. You may have noticed that if you're someone who has to give feedback either at work or in your home, that when you start having conversations with someone where you're trying to give them feedback regarding what it is that they did or maybe did not do, you find that they cut short the conversation and find a way to short circuit that conversation so that it ends in an unhealthy manner. So how do you respond when someone responds to you in a way that you didn't expect, when all you were trying to do was to give them some feedback? Today we're going to cover ways people might respond to you, and we're also going to cover how you in turn could respond to them so that they're more accepting of your feedback. One of the things that someone might do is that they might choose to say, okay, enough, I'm sorry. When some people are struggling to accept feedback, they find that they're in a hurry to cut off a conversation, end it as soon as possible, and simply rush through it. And that's why they jump in by saying, okay, I'm sorry, because they're hoping by doing that, it ends a conversation right then and there, and then you move on. What the person doesn't realize is that by rushing the conversation and seeming like they're apologizing simply to end it, their apology may come across as being hollow and also may come across as a way to simply quit the conversation so that they don't have to take responsibility for whatever it is that they did do or did not do. This kind of response usually comes from frustration, because by you giving feedback to this person, you might trigger something that brings up a bad memory they had of when something went wrong, and they just simply learn to apologize to just get it over with. So how do you respond? When responding to this person in a calm manner, simply tell them that when they say, okay, I'm sorry, it feels as though they're rushing through what you're trying to tell them. They're rushing you through trying to finish what you're trying to say, but they're also not willing to understand fully what they did, and also not seeming like they want to sit with it for a while and fully understand the gravity of what it is that they did. So simply tell them that when they say, okay, I'm sorry, and want to cut it off, what you would prefer is if you both just step back for a bit and slow down for a bit and had the conversation together. So simply just ask them, hey, please slow down in the calmest way possible. There's some people who respond to you giving them feedback by taking it to a whole different level and exaggerating it. And the way they do this is by saying, yes, I get it, I'm a terrible person. This person is used to acknowledging what they've done by simply turning the situation around, so it becomes all about a global criticism of who they are as a person. And the way this might happen would be, you might ask someone or tell someone, oh, by the way, I thought we'd agreed that you would clean up the kitchen. And they respond by saying, yeah, fine. It's because I'm a total mess. I'm just a total mess. You're always saying I'm a total mess. That's taking the situation a bit further than it should go. But you know what? There's something very smart about someone who does this, because what then happens is that the conversation shifts. It stops being about what was not done or what could have been done better, and it suddenly becomes about you reassuring that person that no, they're not a total mess. No, there's nothing wrong with them. And before you know it, the conversation shifts from the feedback and suddenly becomes about making the person feel better instead of having them accept your feedback. So how do you respond to someone who takes over the conversation and switches it in this way? You simply respond to them by saying, it's really hard to have a conversation when you say those kinds of things about yourself, And what I would really love is we could just be able to sit down together and talk about difficult things. Or if you're dealing with someone who requires a little more reassurance, then provide the reassurance and tell them, you are a great friend or you are a great partner, but I felt hurt by this repeated behavior. So could we please focus on this particular behavior and address this particular behavior and not who you are as a person? Something else that you might hear when you're trying to give someone feedback is, okay, let's move on. This person is very similar to the one who says, okay, I'm sorry, to dismiss the conversation. But this one instead is a person who says, move on already. This kind of behavior comes from someone being defensive and not wanting to take responsibility for their behavior, but instead choosing to then flip it on you so that it becomes about you not learning to let go and not about what they did. So then it becomes your issue because you're holding on. In some cases, this same person might then call you dramatic or too sensitive or someone who likes to hold a grudge. When you know you're not, you're just simply trying to give feedback. The interesting thing, though, is that even if you know you're not highly oversensitive or that you're not always nagging, you might internalize what it is that they tell you and start to think that there's something wrong with you and that you're being oversensitive about stuff when you really aren't. So in actual sense, whether you realize it or not, it is a form of gaslighting because it stops being about them and suddenly becomes all about you and what you did. So how do you respond to this kind of behavior that is making you feel like there's something unreasonable about what you're asking? The way you respond to this behavior is by simply saying, I hear that you want us to get past this, and that makes a lot of sense to me. However, I still feel hurt by whatever action it was, and I'd really love to be able to continue to talk about it so we can find a way to resolve it together. The reason I want to keep talking about it is because I am not ready to move on, and I really need you here with me. There's another type of defense that might crop up when you try to give someone feedback, and this one is called the gratitude defense, where someone tries to remind you about everything they've always done for you. With this type of gratitude defense, what happens is that the person tries to remind you about all the things that they have done to show their support in many different ways. And because they've shown this support and been so present in all the other ways, then they should not be held accountable for this one particular thing that you're bringing up. So pretty much the message that you get when you try to give feedback to this person is that there should be no complaints and they should not stick, because instead of feeling hurt or betrayed or dismissed, you should only feel gratitude, and that's it. The thing is, though, is that you know that you're not being ungrateful. You're simply pointing out something that was needing feedback, and that's all you were doing. So how do you respond to this kind of defense? The way you respond to this person is by reminding them that yes, you are grateful for everything they've done. And absolutely, everything they're saying that they have done is true. And you embrace it and accept it, and you're grateful for it. But then in the same breath, remind them that despite the fact that you are eternally grateful, you still need to talk about whatever it is that you wanted to address. And that you addressing it does not take away from the fact that you will forever remain grateful for all the amazing things that they've done. But for this one, because it's on your mind, you really want to be seen and to be heard. And that's all that you're asking for. The last one is the one that personally drives me nuts, irks me. And it's the one where someone comes at you with basic defensiveness by starting by saying, but well, this is the kind of general defensiveness where instead of someone taking the feedback that you're giving them to heart or the feedback that you're giving them and sitting with it so they can understand where you're coming from, what they instead decide to do is to lash out at you by coming back at you with a counter complaint. And the way this usually starts, and you'll know when it's coming, is that someone says, but you also. People who usually respond in this manner are people who tend to quickly feel like they're being backed into a corner. They're also people who are compelled to lash out or to try and distract from the original issue at hand, in the hope that by then focusing on your issues that are also similar to theirs, then you get distracted. The reason why this tactic is so annoying is because it now becomes instead of a conversation, it now becomes a tit for tat discussion to try and see whose offenses are worse. The outcome of this kind of conversation is that in many cases, the original conversation gets dropped. And even if someone does have valid points that they want to bring to you as a counterpoint, trying to bring it up at this particular time doesn't solve anything. And the conversation just goes out the window. So how do you respond to this kind of defense? Start by, first of all, keeping your cool, because this was one of the ones that can trigger you. And as you keep your cool, you say, yes, I understand that I've hurt you, and I'm more than willing to address that issue at another time. But for now, the issue that I'm bringing to you is this. This shows them, the defensive person, that yes, you've heard them. Yes, you know what they were saying, but they didn't bring up their issue first. So maybe you should solve the issues in order of priority, and not simply because they said, but well, you also. What's interesting is that even though we may not think it right now, all of us at one point or another, have been guilty of using one of these to be able to defend ourselves. And we have to recognize that when someone responds to you after you give them feedback, it's because they've immediately put up their defensive wall and are trying to protect themselves so that they don't hear something that they can't handle. But the only way to be able to have these conversations and to have people understand that feedback doesn't always equal attack is to figure out how to respond to them in the gentlest of manners so they can finally hear what you're trying to say and not focus on how you said it or when you said it. I hope these points help you as you go out there and give feedback. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please remember to be kind, because you really have no idea what someone is going through. And to you, hugs and kindness always.